I'm going to call this meeting of the Gloucester School Committee to order. I'll remind everybody that the mission of Gloucester Public Schools is for all students to be successful, engaged, lifelong learners. We'll forgo the salute to the flag. And before we do oral communications or try to do oral communications, I'd just like to say this is our first full school committee meeting at online. There are a number of things. If you want to communicate to the school committee under oral communications and you're doing it by phone, you need to, if you've dialed in, you need to press *9, and that will alert me or James that you want to speak, and we can, right now we can't hear anything that you're saying or any background noise, but we can unmute you and you'll be allowed to speak under the normal conditions of oral communications. If you are watching on a computer, you can let us know that you would like to speak by raising your hand, and there should be a little icon. Where would it be? On the lower right, and you would press that, and a little hand would come out. I have all of your names, and welcome. We have 7 people watching remotely. And so you would press the button if you, and I would recognize you, and then we would unmute you and you'd be able to speak. So that being said, is there anybody who would like to address the school committee under oral communications? Okay. And we have, you are now live, I believe.
Hi, this is Cynthia Carney. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. You state your, because some people can't see, state your name and address as always.
Cynthia Carney, 34 Fernald Street.
Thank you.
I didn't notice in the agenda if you were going to be addressing the Superintendent Search Committee, and I'm not sure if that was addressed at Personnel Subcommittee meetings. There are no minutes from any of the recent meetings, and I know that you had a deadline of March 11th. I think that you were going to announce the makeup of the committee. I was just wondering if you were planning on addressing that at this meeting.
We are going to get an update of, a couple of weeks ago, we extended the timeline. And I don't have that right in front of me, but I believe that announcing the search committee got pushed back by a couple of weeks. That being said, we'll get an update, I believe, from Melissa Texera, who's been in touch with Dorothy Pretzer, and we will at some point. Would you like to just address that now, where we're at? It's not on the agenda, but it is a response to a question. Melissa, would you like to?
I spoke to Dorothy today.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Try it now. It says you're muted.
Yeah, I'm muted.
Hi, sorry to interrupt, Mr. Chairman. Melissa, so we haven't tested this device before. I'm going to mute you right now. Would you mind joining back on the one you were before that we know worked? Sorry about that.
Okay. 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 I'd also like to just give the school committee other instructions. You don't have a little button where you can raise your hand, so you have to actually literally raise your hand if you'd like to speak, like this. And I will recognize you, okay? Okay, so
All right, can you hear me now?
yes, we can.
Okay. So I spoke to Dorothy earlier today. The job has been posted since Friday, March 13th. So right now we're in a waiting period. And Dorothy said she only received a couple applications so far, but she did say that's very typical and that we won't get applications until the last week that it's advertised, which is April 17th. So fortunately for us, we're kind of in quiet mode right now, where we don't have a lot to do while the job's being advertised. But we do need to have a personnel subcommittee meeting sometime within the next couple weeks. And Dorothy will join us for that meeting. And what we will do then is select a screening committee and form a group and probably vote a slate. And then that slate will go forward to the school committee probably in the next meeting. So we'll have to have the personnel subcommittee meeting within the next 2 weeks so that the full committee can vote on the screening committee at our next meeting. The first meeting of the screening committee isn't until April 30th. Dorothy said that in other districts that have been participating in superintendent searches, they've been holding their screening meetings with candidates by Zoom, and it's been very successful. So other than that, there's not much more of an update other than personnel will meet, we'll do the screening committee, and then on April 30th, the screening committee will meet.
Thank you.
Laura?
Just one sort of follow-up on that. So I know at least one applicant hasn't heard anything. Are we responding to the applicants to the screening committee just to give them the sort of timeline, let them know that their applications have been received?
I have not been responding to them. I don't know if Stephanie has just acknowledged that they received the application. But we need to make sure that everybody that has applied understands the new timeline. So I believe that we had done that when we changed the timeline. But I will have to find out, Laura.
So, right. So I know at least one person never got a response. So that may be more than one person. So we just have to obviously be sure that everyone, sort of understands what's happening in the process.
I would say that that is definitely more than one person, as I have not received any communication about this and that. Therefore, I had the question about what's happening with the committee.
Okay, well, I understand. What's happening with the committee is we're still accepting applications, and we have not at this point filled all of the slots that we had intended to fill. Or we don't have applicants for all of the slots that we have hoped to fill. So for people out there, we are still looking for applicants for some of the slots, and they should send it into the to me at the main office.
So which slots, I mean, how can we communicate this to people, which slots we're looking to fill and what the deadline is now?
Okay, well, we'll have to post that tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't have that information in front of me. It's at the main office in a folder.
Will it be posted on the school committee website, I'm assuming?
Yes,
Thank you.
okay. Okay, Joe Calamo,
Can you guys hear?
we can hear you, Joe, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for recognizing me. I know some of you, and as many of you know, I'm currently the president of GEF for, I think, another week, but I'm not calling for that purpose. I'm joining as a parent. I didn't know, Mr. Chairman, if there was time on the agenda to discuss the current situation with our kids being out of school and the plan moving forward with optional work versus really starting to drive some actual schoolwork. I know a number of my friends and children across the country are utilizing technology and continuing classwork. And I didn't know if that was part of your agenda tonight or if we could discuss that at some point.
It is, will be covered under the superintendent's report, which we're going to take up right after the consent agenda.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And we have Ida Shaker. Ida, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. I just had a concern. Children with specific special needs are at a much higher risk for skill regression, significant skill regression. And I was wondering if the district is planning to assist families in need of services such as OT, PT, speech, social skills via virtual instruction or modified techniques to help the families. I understand that Chromebooks are being distributed above 4th grade and up, but it might be helpful if, the younger children who do receive those services for families to be able to communicate, even via Zoom, where, one of the therapists or specialists can help them, do some things. Obviously that they're not going to have the full range, but anything would be better than nothing. And I know some of these families are struggling to really get by day to day.
Thank you, Ida. I believe this will be addressed during the superintendent's report also. We are, of course, trying to get all of these things up and running as quickly as we can, but some of them are more difficult than others. So stay tuned and hopefully your questions will be answered.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to recognitions. And I'd like to just start by recognizing all of the people in the administration, in the health department, and in the school department, and all the work that they've been doing to try to keep us all safe, as well as to continue education in Gloucester. But I'd also like to thank all of the clerks at the supermarkets and the aides at the hospital, and the people that are out there working for very low wages that are basically exposing themselves to the public every day so that we have all of our needs met as best as possible. Samantha. Go ahead. Oh, okay.
I'm good now. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I would just like to acknowledge the teachers who have gone above and beyond during this difficult time. I know, not from my own experience, because I don't have kids in the system yet, but from some friends' experiences, that teachers have been meeting with kids on Google Meets from the jump. We're now in the 2nd week, and teachers are really doing a good job at making this work despite the difficult circumstances. And I know that just seeing their faces helps kids, because as we know, school is sometimes the safest place for these kiddos. So to see their teachers on a daily basis, I think is a big deal. So I just like to thank those teachers.
Okay. Anyone else? Melissa?
Thank you. I too echo what Samantha just said, thanking the teachers that are doing the voluntary work that we have right now. Being a member to Class Dojo and having a granddaughter in elementary school, my dojo is going all day long. Teachers interacting with Emma and things like that. And also a huge shout out, like Jonathan said, to administration in the city for all the work that's being done. I mean, it's amazing that we're all quarantined or home, just staying home to be safe, but yet we're getting a lot of work done. So kudos to everybody, including James Pope, that's making this happen. So thank you.
Any other recognitions? Joel?
Thank you. Yeah, obviously what was just said, I want to repeat. And also just want to, as we try and find silver linings to this adjustment to new reality, one of them is the fact that for the first time, people at home, no matter where they are, able to log in and see our school committee meeting live. And so it'd be great if when we get back into the normal meeting setting, if we can keep an eye toward some of this sort of accessibility for people at home on a device, on their phone, on a tablet, to be able to see what we're up to. So again, you know, the small silver linings that may come from this could be one of them.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Is there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would like to remove for further discussion? Seeing none.
Sorry, I was going to do a motion, but I didn't know how this worked.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll do a motion that we approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay. We need to do all votes by roll call. Do you want to do that, Maria? Or do you want me to do it?
I can do it.
Okay.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Wiesen.
Yes.
Okay. The consent agenda passes unanimously. Without objection, I'm going to take the superintendent's report out of order and as our first item under deliberations on educational issues, as this will be an update on the school closures as well as all of our efforts to try to deliver education to the students of Gloucester. So Dr. Sapphire.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll begin where we started when we first closed schools on March the 13th, and then try to move through some of the issues leading to what the current status is today. And I think everybody's under the understanding that this is an extremely fluid situation and that we are waiting for full guidance from the state, hopefully by this coming Friday. That has been backed up a couple of times. Again, you know, we called school on a Friday, we had faculty meetings on a Monday, and then information to students was sent out by Wednesday. The directive that went out is to provide, for lack of a better term, enrichment kinds of materials, and there are reasons for that, which I'll get into in a moment. At the elementary level, resources were grouped by grade level, and academic subjects followed by the work of the specialists. And as has already been mentioned, there are a host of different sorts of programs, Lexia, MobiMax, Happy Numbers. Elementary parents hopefully are familiar with those particular programs, and they have been made available to students online. At the high school, activities and resources have been organized by academic department and classes, also followed by student support services. Under student support services, since if there's a question, Jonathan, I'm looking at some notes, so if somebody has a question or something, please let me know. Since many of us are, of course, concerned about the emotional health and well-being of our students, but there are links, including direct outreach to students in school counseling, managing anxiety and stress. The nurse's office is available. The Gloucester school-based Health Center. A number of our support staff are available for remote visits, including our family nurse practitioner, social workers, and community health worker at the high school. We have very similar type of arrangement at the O'Malley Innovation Middle School, following a similar pattern where resources and information are organized by grade level and subject. And again, with reference to special education and student support services, we can turn to the guidance and counseling, health office and nurses, occupational therapy, speech and language, reading, life skills and learning, and academic support have all begun to seek to outreach to the community and to our students. And Patty Wegman is here. At one point, I would like to have her perhaps chime in and provide some background as to what is being reported to her. Patty, would this be a good opportunity for you to speak up a little bit?
Sure. So I guess I just want to start by saying thank you for having me tonight. And I am very overwhelmed by the amount of communication that our special educators are having with parents and families. The staff have been asked to keep a log of communication so that they can keep track of who they're reaching out to and when. We have special ed liaisons adding to the dashboard of activities for kids. Our occupational therapists, speech language pathologists, physical therapists have all added to the dashboard as well. A lot of work has been done on behalf of our board certified behavior analysts, our BCBAs. They are reaching out to our families where we have some more complicated cases, really just checking in with our kids' families to see that, you know, are our kids sleeping? Are they eating? Are they trying to help the parents schedule a routine with their kids during the day so they're not getting a lot of screen time, but trying to recommend some exercises and activities that they can do with their children during the day. So I'm in constant communication with them just to make sure that our students that really have more complicated disabilities are getting the support that they need. I know that our psychologists and school adjustment counselors are going to be meeting this Friday. They're trying to compile some resources for parents and try to send a common message to the families as well in case during this, now it's an extended period of time, that they feel that they have some resources that they can utilize in case there's some type of mental health crisis with one of their children. I've been talking to our special ed program leaders just to sort of get a sense as to where we're at with our team meetings that we need to be having during this period of time and what that's looking like for them. We are in discussion, just early stages of discussion as to whether or not we might want to move to some type of virtual meeting platform to assist in getting some of these, you know, IEPs completed with families. Again, making sure that parents are comfortable with that type of platform. We certainly will accommodate them in any way, shape, or form.
Great.
And,
anything else?
Sam?
Thanks, Patty. Just a couple questions. So this is actually for both you and Rich, because so you had mentioned that student support services are available. Does that mean that parents have to do the outreach, or are the social workers and other teachers and such reaching out on a regular basis with these people on their caseload?
So right now we've had them do an initial phone contact. Again, I have not, you know, they have not intimated to me whether or not they're leaving their own personal phone number or contact information in case there's something that they need immediately. I know that they are leaving the numbers to emergency services and, you know, advise people to call emergency services or 911 if there's an emergency. They're not doing direct counseling right now, but they are at least available to provide support to parents if they need something.
Okay. So do we have the capability of using Google Meets? Like, can professionals schedule regular meetings with kiddos or their parents on Google Meets? I would never expect that people give out their personal information, but are teachers using that as a platform, or is it available? I guess I'm just trying to figure out how people are connecting.
Rich, did you want to address that directly, or do you want me to?
I can start and you can follow up. Obviously, we do have the capacity and the capability to use Google Meet. There is a conference call tomorrow with the Department of Education regarding special education. What initially was offered to us was that districts, and I'm almost quoting, districts were encouraged to be creative and to reach out to families as best as possible, meaning sending education resources home and trying to be in touch with families on how they're accessing the resources. But we were also being warned that the initial constraint has been that if schools run what can be referred to as virtual classes, then services have to be provided. And the question then becomes whether or not or how that's feasible in the case of direct contact, even remotely. We did receive notice from the US Department of Ed through our Department of Ed that they did not want the regulations in any way to inhibit our capacity for reaching out to students. And we'll get further clarification again on that tomorrow. And we're also going to be consulting with our special education attorney tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So what that does suggest to me is a more active approach. Patty has already indicated how special educators and social service folks have been reaching out and keeping a log. My hope and expectation is that we will become that much more assertive in our ability to reach out. And if so, then we'll be able to use the technologies at hand.
Mm-hmm.
Long-winded, but hopefully it's a yes.
Okay. One more question in regards to what you were saying, Patty. Just from my own experience, there's obviously a lot of overlap with mental health organizations, and they probably are still seeing their kiddos weekly. So are you guys sort of expecting that school social workers reach out to mental health organizations that are working with kids on a regular basis just to kind of collaborate or at least touch base? Are you going to keep track of those conversations as well? It's just kind of a nice way to keep track of kids to make sure that everyone's doing okay and assess needs.
Sure. I mean, that would be something they would be doing anyway if there was a student that had some type of outside agency that they were working with. We have a very eager and ready and willing group of school adjustment counselors and psychologists that are eager to help support our families and our students right now. So I would anticipate that they're going to be continuing those conversations. And as Dr. Sapphire said, we'll be getting more guidance tomorrow and on Friday regarding really how we can continue that outreach and support our families.
Kathy, you had a question?
Yes, so I know you use the term regular communication, and I'm hoping at some point that gets better clarified. Does that mean, we're reaching out to these families once a week, 3 times a week? What does that mean? And what can families expect, so that we don't get somebody saying, I haven't heard from somebody, in X days or X weeks, and are we doing what we say we're going to be doing, and are we actually also being able to reach the families, and have we gotten, assertive enough to figure out the best way to make that contact, and arranging the frequency with which families are comfortable and are feeling supported. So that I just would like some more clarity as hopefully the next, week, as things get better defined on things like that.
And Kathy, I can speak specifically in regard to special education, because I know that, the first couple of weeks parents were getting a little overwhelmed with the amount of outreach. So the special educators are now, in the logs that I'm seeing, are really just scheduling, have asked specifically, do you want me to call you or would you like me to email you? And then are scheduling, I'm going to do a regular check-in with you at 10 o'clock on Tuesday, and through the special educator. And they're working together to sort of, again, streamline this so that we're not having 3 people contact a parent in one day. And again, just so parents cannot feel so overwhelmed and tied to their technology because teachers are calling them. So, we're trying to streamline that on our end. It seems that the bugs are being worked out, this week, and it seems to be much better. Staff are very good at making sure. Today, we were looking for emergency phone number for some people that we were not able to get in touch with. So they're really, they get anxious if they don't hear from somebody. So they reached out to me to see if there were other contacts that I could get to find certain contacts for families. And so they felt, as of today, I know that some teachers felt much more comfortable about the contact that they had made that they hadn't been able to make earlier.
Great, thank you.
Okay, to move on. So I want to go back to the question. And,
I'm sorry, I was raising my hand, Jonathan. Hello?
We can hear you, Safathi, if you want to ask.
Okay, well, I didn't know. Can you say, well, if I don't want to hear point of order on here. Anyways, I want to know when she says they were reaching out to parents. I got quite a few calls. So who's reaching out to the parents? Because if I can get 10 phone calls that they're not being called, who's reaching out to them? Are we really reaching out to them? I'm sorry, I don't want to call anyone a liar or anything else, but is there certain days and then we have a list of people, or has everyone been called so far or not everyone?
Well, as I think we heard from Patty, that our special education folks are keeping a log of the connections and the contacts. And I think that in the coming days that we can provide the school committee with some documentation so that we can begin to see what sort of patterns are taking place and where the consistencies are and where they're not. So we'll try to provide you with that data as soon as we can.
That'd be great, thank you. Because also, when they do the data, is anyone, because I know that we're having a problem too, the more they stay home, the more these parents are going to need some kind of someone to talk to, a therapist, the children, whether we do Zoom with HIPAA like they do at the hospital, but we're gonna have to, I'm figuring that out, how we can do that. I have some therapists that are willing to, they're home, so they're willing to help out. So I really need to have some update. Thank you.
Okay. Okay then. Of course, when we first closed school and when we first established what we would be presenting to students across the district, it was based, our decision was based upon 2 fundamental concepts that were driving the potential for academic requirements not. And first and foremost, it's equity. And that equity exists on at least two fronts. One has to do obviously with electronic access, and the other two is the access to special education services that we had mentioned. So, in its inception and having closed schools as quickly as we did, trying to get information out for students to have some resources, we're sort of coming to the end of that phase, predicated on the need for equity, but we're also waiting for some very strong guidance from the Department of Education in terms of what sort of framework we can provide. They, and I'll mention this again probably, but they have been in close conversation with the state unions, with the MTA and the AFT. They themselves are looking to create a memorandum of understanding. And of course, we have received a request for negotiations, and in fact have received a first round of proposals from the union as well, so that we can begin to put together, through the impact bargaining for a situation which is unprecedented, something which is going to provide constructive educational and social support for our kids, and at the same time work within the constraints and the concerns that the union has for moving forward for the teachers as well. So those are, yes.
Laura, go ahead. You're muted, babe.
Yep. Okay. So just a couple questions on that. So we're now heading into week 3. And I understand both you're waiting for DESE and for DESE's sort of memorandum with the unions, and then for the Gloucester conversation with the union. Is that right?
Correct.
So on 2 fronts. So just a couple of observations and a question. I mean, DESE is not providing this directive at this, I mean, you know, as you said, it keeps getting pushed on and pushed on. So is there a requirement to wait for them, or are we able to come up with a plan without them in that absence?
Yes. Well, it's prudent to wait for the Department of Education, because these are very high-level conversations. They involve, again, the state's unions. They involve the MASS, Mass Association of School Superintendents, and it would be risky to come up with proposals that conceivably could be less than what's recommended, and it can be risky to come up with proposals that conceivably could be more strident than what the unions at the state level have accepted. So that's not to suggest that we don't have plans in the making, and that Greg, if we were to ask him, can tell you about some of the scheduling that's already taking place on paper, in the abstract, at both the high school and the middle school. So please hold your other thought. And Greg, can you just speak in very general terms to the kinds of planning that's taking place, at least at those two schools?
Yeah, I can. Thank you. And this is really brief. I just want to share that the principals of all levels have been discussing and making plans for extended learning and more regular opportunities. We have not shared those with anyone because our guidance has been to wait for the DESE guidance, but I just want to assure you that the principals have put a lot of thought into it and would be prepared to come up with regular schedules very quickly. Obviously, in collaboration with the union and all other parties, but they have to do some of the thinking about how they would manage their schools virtually, and they've been doing that. So I've seen them on paper, but they have not been shared because we're not at that point yet.
Laura, did you finish up yours?
I didn't.
Yes.
So just to understand, so my area of most familiarity is the elementary schools, and there is a wide variety of what is happening in the elementary schools. Totally inconsistent from what I can see. So some kids have seen their teachers and are regularly seeing their teachers. My child has never seen her teacher, and there is no plan to this week either. So I'm just wondering, obviously some schools and some teachers are already sort of in this. And so is that sort of, outside, they can do that sort of outside any memorandum with the union, but we can't do it directly because there's no memorandum with the union. I just want to really understand what's happening here and how quickly, because we have this one piece of what's going to come from DESE, then we have another piece of negotiating with the teachers, and that's great and makes sense, except that now the kids are going to be home, for another month. Mm-hmm. And I have full confidence that everyone's working on it, but how quickly can it be implemented when there's all these pieces?
Right.
The goal is for the kids.
What I can say, based upon very, very recent correspondence, is that the Teachers Association shares the same concern about equity that you do, and their particular concern extends to what the delivery is and what students are receiving, but also their concern about the level of I don't wish to use this in a negative sense, but the level of uniformity of what teachers are delivering. At this point, things, because of the reasons that we had stated, the equity issue, and because of the speed to expedite for these first couple of weeks, we asked teachers to group together, work together at the elementary level. I'm a little surprised to hear that the contact's not taking place, because the recommendation was for grade 4 teachers to work together and put out resources, and for grade 2 teachers to put out resources. And I hope that as a parent, not as a school committee member, that you've reached out to the principal to find out what can be done and when. We, for our part, we see the vectors that are taking shape, and we've already articulated what they are. There is, I think there's prudence in hearing what is coming out of the state, and there is necessity for meeting with the union as quickly as possible so that we can bring all of those points of view together. I would like to think that the end result of that is a unified approach and one which within the recommendations, the broad-based recommendations, will both unify the delivery and at the same time provide more of a challenge and expectation for our kids.
I totally appreciate that. And I just wanted to clarify, when I did communicate with the principal, part of the response in a very kind way is that there's been no directive to do certain things and that some teachers are individually going above and beyond, but that there's been no directive to do anything other than add to that list of resources.
That's correct. That's correct.
So
We
a
have
list of,
asked for, again, I know Sam, you want to get in. Again, this was done on the fly for 2 weeks, and knowing the constraints involving special ed, knowing the constraints involving remote access to computers, what we asked for were enrichment activities. And people can point to a couple of districts here and there. I sent out a document today from the various different roundtables across the state. And by and large, you will see that most districts are in the same boat we are, where they're concerned about the equity issue. And until we can get all of that stuff straightened out, what we're prepared to do is provide enrichment. But our hope and expectation, that we're all in agreement, is that we're about to enter into a new phase. We're entering into the 3rd week, which was extended by the state, and now schools are going to be closed until May 4th. So, we're right on the cusp of hopefully making those changes. We're being told that, as I mentioned before, and Patty mentioned, the special education conference call is tomorrow at 10:30, and the commissioner will be speaking to districts on Friday, I believe at 10 o'clock.
okay, thank you. And I just want to say what I was saying was not from other districts, it's within Gloucester.
Understood.
Some teachers are doing, a lot. Some teachers, I don't want to say a lot, more outward facing.
We've
They're all working hard.
We've heard about that from two ends of the spectrum.
Right.
Sam?
Samantha?
Just to sort of piggyback on that, right? So, I mean, I guess before we move forward, and I did want to say this at the beginning of the meeting, that I don't know about anybody else, but this is my first global pandemic. So I think we're all sort of starting from scratch, right? I'm putting on my social work hat for a minute so we can all just sort of take a deep breath that, this is our first time dealing with this, right? We don't really know the right answers, but I think part of that is to normalize it, to put it into perspective, and also check sort of people's expectations. And I think that also includes parents, right? There are some people who see that on Facebook, right, that their other kids are meeting with their teachers every single day on Google Meet, and other people haven't even heard from their teachers. So I think what we need to do as a district is make sure that the expectation is clear across the board, because parents are seeing sort of a very mixed bag of expectations. And I don't think that that's fair for parents and for kids, because of course every kid is going to want to see their teacher. And so I think we really do need to get a better handle on making sure that those expectations are very clearly outlined, right. Even for parents, right? That no, we're not expecting teachers right now to reach out every single day, but you can expect it on such and such day. I think we need to be able to give some guidance on that.
Right.
So.
Yes, completely agreed. And we need to move fast on it, and we need to hear what the state has to say, and we need to hear where negotiations are going to lead us, and it needs to be, we need to move on it. And that, I think, out of those two vectors, to use the term again, that is how we're going to be able to establish what the unified expectations are, and then we can communicate to that to parents as well.
Did you say me, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I also want to piggyback on what Sam was saying, because, we've had technology and Chromebooks, and we invested a ton of money as a district in a city in providing technology resources to students. And, I don't want to compare us necessarily to some of the wealthier districts, but we've had this technology in place I mean, I did a Zoom conference the other day, and it literally took me 90 seconds to figure it out. And I am not a technology person. So I think our expectations of both what our teachers can and should provide need to, I think, go up more, because clearly they should be able to do it. And if they can't, there's professional development that can be happening to support those teachers who need it. You know, and I know your superintendent's report talked about rolling out Chromebooks, which is great because kids will have access to technology. But I feel like there's a lot of work going on, but not a lot of progress yet that people have seen. And I think the quicker we can get to that place, I know haven't read anywhere where other districts have gone into negotiation to be providing what they're currently providing. And so unless somebody has information about that every, 360 communities across the Commonwealth are in negotiations and they're not doing things because they don't know what their expectations are, what their agreement is. I just haven't read that. So there's got to be some very common sense things we can be expecting and hoping our teachers will be doing on a consistent basis with which they use their professionalism as a teacher to deliver it to their students.
Right. I know, Melissa, Naomi has sent me about 4 MOUs that are, the ink is still wet. So, we're right on the cusp of doing the same.
Have we heard when we can have that meeting?
She, being Naomi, has reached out to Charmaine, did not get an answer. And she has been in touch with Cynthia, who I believe is on the line. And Cynthia has sent, I think today, a set of preliminary proposals to get started.
Thank you.
Melissa?
I was just going to say what Rich said. Naomi did say other districts have been negotiating what the expectations of work is. And Naomi and I were talking about what type of meeting we're going to have and when that's going to be. So stay tuned, Kathy. You'll hear soon about that.
Okay. Samantha?
Are those also going to be public as sort of the regular negotiations are?
It depends if we look at it as if we're reopening. If we're reopening, which to me, that's what it looks like, I would assume that it's the same ground rules, or if not, then we go in the first time we meet and discuss ground rules and determine if it's going to be public or not. I hope it's public because that way the parents can hear what our expectations are and hopefully be able to negotiate those expectations.
I agree.
Okay. Continue, sir.
I think so. Thank you. We've covered a lot of this stuff, and people have mentioned the computer piece that we are beginning phase 1 of handing out Chromebooks. Any student who does not have access to a device of any kind in their homes can, you've heard the messages, can now come by tomorrow and Friday from 10 to 12, and they can pick up a Chromebook. We will be doing a drive-by distribution and maintaining as much of a safety precaution as we can. The reason we chose to Blackburn is so that folks would have to drive up, remain in their cars, form a line. They'll be asked to drive up to the front entrance, turn off their engines. We'll be asking if they haven't RSVP'd, which we requested today in our message. And we'll be asking for the name, the grade, the school, the ID number. Our IT people can then just put the number of the Chromebook, and we can provide the device, and everything will be taken care of outside. Nobody will be coming into the building. We'll have at least one table, possibly a second table, so that somebody can then at that point get out of the car, grab the Chromebook, get back in the car, and take off. So we know that there are K-3 families that also are in need. There were X number of readily available Chromebooks that needed to be prepped by the IT department. They have about 150, and we'll begin the process tomorrow and Friday. anybody, and we've received about a dozen emails from people who, one person is an essential worker working in an essential field and they can't get there. So we will make some sort of arrangement, excuse me, so that they can get a hold of a loaner device for their kids as well. And we'll be figuring that out along the way. And then we're going to see where we stand next week in order to try to get the lower grades, the earlier grades as well.
Excuse me, Dr. Sapphire?
Yes, ma'am.
Have we talked, I know that some of them we're talking about right now too with FEMA money for essentials, and some of the mayors were asking about purchasing new books and if they'd get reimbursed and what's going to happen. And also, have you let people know, I know that I saw all the emails, but when you maybe give out the Crohn's book to let them know about Comcast offering some families $10 for internet. Not everyone has internet.
Yes, we sent out that message. Comcast will offer the first 2 months free. And then, as you said, it's $9.95 per month. I only received one phone call. It was a week ago Sunday. The parent asked for some assistance. I said, I will call you Monday. We can walk it through together. But then she took care of it and sent me a note and said she's all set. I've not received any other requests for assistance. I can certainly send that memo out again and that message. And because we figure, based upon, we had conducted a survey, based upon X number of surveys that came back and the number who were in need, we're estimating that there could be as many as up to 200, 250 Chromebooks that could go just for grades 4 through 7. And don't forget, they're about $250 a piece. So there is a little bit of a liability issue, but the overwhelming issue has to do with the equity and trying to provide the resource for students so that they can access the remote materials that we provide.
Samantha?
This is sort of one of the things that I think we should communicate to some community organizations. So I had a conversation with my daughter's EI worker today. She didn't know about the food happening in Gloucester, and she didn't know about the Comcast deal. And so I think it would be really great to sort of reach out to early intervention, to reach out to Children's Friend, Leahy, any of those community-based workers that are working with some of our most at-risk families, to give them a sense, because they're really an integral part in helping families access resources. And so the more information we can sort of streamline into community organizations, I think the better.
Okay, that's great. I've been sending all of my emails out to both Pathways and to the YMCA. If you'd be gracious enough just to send me an email, just list the names of the organizations. If you know who to contact, then I can CC them as well.
Yep,
that would be very helpful.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? Moving on to item number 5, circuit breaker. There are 2 messages coming out of the Department of Education. The first is that if a child is temporarily absent from school, they will provide circuit breaker reimbursement for 20 consecutive school days. But we are also being informed that we can prepay up to 3 months, and that the prepay itself also will include reimbursement from circuit breaker. This came from Jay Sullivan, who is an associate commissioner from the Department of Education, and also, I don't know the gentleman's name, but the executive director of the Mass Association of School Business Officers also reinforced that same concept. So we are working under the premise that we can prepay for this year, and in order to keep these schools afloat and to maintain and ensure that there's a spot for our kids, and that we will receive reimbursement for circuit breaker as well. Food service, I think most, except perhaps some of the agencies that Samantha was talking about, we continue to provide lunch. Martha Jo is reporting that we're serving about 100 to 125 students daily. That's at Beeman and at Veterans, and also at Veterans Way and Willowwood Road. We're also providing, out of a bus, I believe, we're providing not only lunch, but breakfast for the next day as well. Things are going well so far. Martha Jo has about 12 food service workers, including the driver, who've agreed to work during the closure. We remain, I know Martha Jo is concerned as the condition and the situation potentially worsens. We are hopeful that we won't have any illnesses amongst our workers. If something should happen, our backup plan is to shut down O'Malley for a couple of days, to have DPW go in and once again do its sanitization disinfectant piece. and to make arrangements to move our foodstuffs over to the high school. I don't know that the high school has the same amount of storage, but we're going to make do and do what we have to if the situation should occur and we have an illness which forces us to close the O'Malley and then move to the high school. Item number 7, we kind of have discussed the parameters at length. Again, what is coming out of the state in their conversations and negotiations with the various other agencies across the state, and our need to get into our discussions with our union so that we can come up with that unified approach and expectation so that teachers are delivering on the same wavelength and students are receiving the same level of delivery as well. Item number 8 is just some of the other miscellaneous items. I'm not going to go through them. I will mention packet development. We're still, as the mayor mentioned, there still are going to be kids that don't have access to the internet, may not take advantage or cannot take advantage of the Comcast piece. So we are working on a process so that we can get packet development and distribution taken care of as well.
Dr. Sapphire?
Yes, ma'am.
Is there any way that we could get like a hotspot or something, whatever that's called? Because if they don't have Comcast, they're not going to get that. And Comcast was not going to be able to get to their houses and to put up this Wi-Fi. So I don't know what we could do, because there's got to be a hotspot somewhere, what we could do to get one for them.
Yeah, I don't have the savvy. One could use one's phone, provided it's plugged in as a potential hotspot. Greg, I don't know if you have any thoughts on the matter.
I see Grant Harris on. He would be the best to answer any questions.
All
Like
right,
that.
I'll James is on. You know what? I'll talk to both of them to figure out what we could do. I know I used to see some of the kids after school at the library. The library's closed, unfortunately. And I know some certain areas has nothing to do with the Wi-Fi. It's just a dead spot, and they have all these extras that I'm trying to work with cable to get them. So we're working on that. In the meantime, if you could do another one, because I know some people get the phone calls, Dr. Sapphire, if you could just do like some of the information, do a robocall.
Sure.
Because if they're not going to get their emails if they can't have internet. So and some of them won't have it, but they all can pick up their phones, even if they have those.
Yeah, you know, we thought of that, and we're presuming that people who don't have computers are picking up this information on their phones.
Some of them have the old phones.
Yeah.
So a call they get, but they sometimes get email.
Okay, unless there's another question, I would just like to, I had received an email from the Mass Association of School Superintendents at 3:16 this afternoon, and it kind of encapsulates where things are. And I'll only read part of it, obviously, of course. There is some common ground between the union's priorities and the principles the commissioner laid out. The focus for right now is getting to a mutual agreement among the groups and DESE. If possible, that's what's being worked on right now as best we know. There is growing impatience, and we are messaging that we need to have something to superintendents ASAP with the prospects of a much longer closure ahead. That message was loud and clear with our members yesterday on the call, and to which we in the offices have expressed to the commissioner. We all realize the unique and uncharted waters we are in, but that doesn't slow the pressure you are all feeling in communities. So in many respects, that encapsulates our hopes and expectations, and I think many districts are experiencing the same pressure as well to get further organized.
Laura?
I just have a unrelated, not unrelated, but just another question. Has the high school and the middle school gone through and donated all the personal protective equipment, masks, goggles to local hospitals? I'm assuming yes.
They're working, yes, they're working with the health department, and with the exception of 2 or 3 masks for the computer access delivery distribution tomorrow, our nurse, director of nurses, Cindy Junker, is working with the health department to donate the materials and equipment that we have.
Is there a possibility of taking a photograph or something of that to share with the community, that so we know that just as a positive sort of, we're all in this together sort of communications device?
I can certainly ask.
It would be, Essex Tech has done a really, really good job of showing how they're distributing their gear throughout the communities. And it would be a great idea just to have some photos of that.
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions of the superintendent? No, seeing none, do we have a motion to accept the superintendent's report?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote, Maria? Uh-oh.
Dr. Sapphire, your screen sharing.
I am, because I'm moving on to the next thing.
Okay, we Maria?
The roll call.
Yeah, we need a roll call vote.
Maybe you should call Jonathan.
Sorry,
Okay,
sorry, I couldn't get my microphone to work.
okay.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson, and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Okay. It carries unanimously. We'll move on to the next item, which is the presentation of the draft 2020-2021 District Improvement Plan.
Okay, once again, thank you, Mr. Chair. Both Greg and I, and Patty, I believe is still on the line, can help us with the special education piece. This is the executive summary. As most of you know, the District Improvement Plan is an annual plan, but it is consistent in many of the multi-year initiatives that take place. And when and where there's something new that's introduced, we bring that into the plan as well. Our district improvement plans have historically been predicated on 4 columns, 4 silos. They are interactive, they are interpenetrable, but it also helps to provide some coherence to what we're doing. The first has to do with the unification and coherence of our curriculum. The second is meeting individual student needs. The third, effective use of data. And the fourth is professional culture and community. Item number 1, makes it a little bit harder for me to see, but I guess I can wing it. Increase student engagement through the implementation of strategies and practices designed to promote intrinsic motivation, competence, and growth mindset. One of the first and foremost concerns on our minds has to do with the turnaround and the sustainable improvement of both the high school and the O'Malley. And this particular goal is predicated both on the turnaround plan that's been established by Gloucester High School and also the plan that is in progress at the O'Malley, all dedicated to find the instructional focus that is going to bring about those particular qualities in our students. At the elementary level, we're looking to develop and implement a multi-year plan to build the capacity of teachers, learning to provide learning experiences around the principles of student autonomy, belonging, competence, and relevancy as well. We can talk a little bit more particularly about that if you like. Greg, did you want to add anything on that?
I'm happy to add as much as you'd like. I can see school committee members, so if there is a question and I can hear, if there's a question, please just shout out. I'll try to, otherwise I'll try to keep it more brief. Just very quickly, autonomy, competence, and relevance. We are creating a multi-year plan in collaboration with 5 other districts to work on social emotional learning competencies, and we also are partnering with Manchester Essex and Harvard and Gabby Schlickman around a combination of universal design for learning and social emotional learning. So it's something that I think is worth highlighting more at another meeting, especially once we begin our joint project with Manchester, Essex, and Harvard.
Thank you. And again, I can't see if anybody puts a hand up, so somebody should interrupt, and please let me know. Next, that we are going to be continuing to establish effective processes and practices, focusing on protocols for assistive technology, the interpretation of neuropsychological assessments, professional development in the math content area, and the streamlining of student service team processes. The neuropsychological assessments are related to language-based learning disabilities. Math and professional development for our special education teachers has been an ongoing process. I know that Patty and others have received feedback on how to better serve parent and teacher concerns with respect to our student service teams. We are concerned that there is a conflation between the fact that a child's primary language is not English and the potential for that child prematurely being named as someone in need of special education services. So we want to provide professional development that enables us to make the distinction between what is a language barrier and what is necessary to prove conclusively or to demonstrate conclusively that the child might have a learning disability as well. And then the last item is to implement recommendations from a program evaluation that took place about our elementary and preschool autism programs. Patty, is there anything you wish to elaborate?
No, the ongoing professional development for ELLs and special education, I'm looking to work with some specialists from Western Mass, some consultants that have done a lot of work with populations around Springfield and Fitchburg and those areas that have some of the same complications with the influx of ELL students into their districts and have experienced some of the same complications that we have with that. So ongoing this spring and into the fall.
Okay, thank you. Under the silo of meeting individual needs, there is the issue of addressing chronic absenteeism. And in fact, our situation in Gloucester with respect to chronic absenteeism is at best severe. The state has provided us with some targets that the target for our non-high school is 9.9%, and I believe we're at about 10.9%. At this point, chronic absenteeism is 18 absences or more, in other words, 10% or more. And our DESE target for the high school is at 27.8%. And I believe that we are just about at 30% of our students at the high school are absent 18 or more times in a school year. Greg, would you kindly take over?
Yes, happily. I know that members of the school committee know that I'm very focused on this particular aspect. I'm glad to be able to share that our program subcommittee is going to be working in depth on this problem as well. Unfortunately, we were not able to meet at our most recent meeting, but I hope that we'll take this up remotely. 30% chronic absenteeism is a shocking number, and it's something that I consider a community issue, and we've started working with the City Department of Health, Police, Wellspring, Compass program. We've put together a group that is going to be meeting at least, or was on schedule to meet about every 3 weeks, and to begin looking at any kind of barriers, looking at outreach, looking at ways that we can leverage state grants to bring in some multi-district coordination or regional coordination on this. So there's a lot that we've just gotten rolling, and unfortunately it was in February that we really picked up some steam, both with this community group and also a group that met at Bank Gloucester last time in end of February, where we had additional partners who were willing to work on this issue. United Way is another partner that I met with recently to talk about this issue. So there's a lot of work that really just got rolling, and it's something that should be top priority for us for the next several years to bring this back down to state averages and below, hopefully.
Greg, I have a question.
Yep.
These targets that have been set, are these targets state averages, or are these targets specific for our district based on where we are and where they want us to be?
These targets were set by DESE based on where we are now and what we have to meet. My hope is that we far exceed this and are well below if we put everything we have into this. But those are the targets set by us for next year by DESE.
And is there anything you can add to explain why the high school is, 3 times what we're looking at for the elementary schools? With what's going on differently there that's causing our number and our goal to be so much higher?
It's such a complex issue. One of the very first topics of discussion of this group, and we're splitting into subgroups to work on this, is to directly survey students and their families to try to understand attitudes, perceptions. We are taking a very close look at any linkage in the schedules and course failures, and if there's any connection to that. But one of our first steps is to really go get deep into our understanding of students and why they are making the decisions that they're making. And then we'll look at all the multitude of issues that may also be connected as well. But it's a pretty complex issue.
Sure. I guess what I'm trying to figure out is it typical, not necessarily our specific numbers, but this ratio of a high school population versus an elementary population?
Oh, absolutely. It increases in middle school statewide, and it increases again in high school statewide. Ours is above, but there's definitely a ratio from elementary, middle, and high that is the norm.
As you can see on the second bullet, we'd like to work with the program school subcommittee and the school committee in developing outreach efforts. In other words, we're asking by whatever means possible and under the auspices of the school committee to help us get the message out about the importance of attendance and its relationship to achievement. And then that actually holds over to where we are currently now as a result of the school closures, because what we heard from our meeting this past Monday with some representatives from the union is that participation rates amongst children is not as high as we would like it to be. At the Gloucester High School, you can see there's, I won't go through each one.
Rich, can I just ask one quick question? Sorry, this is Sam.
Yes, of course.
Greg, do you mind just sharing a little bit more information? It can be an email about those community groups that are meeting, like who's a part of it and how often they're meeting.
Yes, I'd be happy to. And as I mentioned, we had 2 meetings at the high school pulling these groups together, and then the recent interruption. So I will send you what the group is, what our intention was, and what we were planning on doing, and hopefully we can figure out how to do this remotely.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks so much.
Can I just ask a follow-up on that? Which was Greg, for you.
Sure.
Given this current bizarre moment, I'd love to, maybe this is for after the meeting or for, via email, but I'd love to know if there's a way that you see that the program subcommittee can help with this, as even though we're in the midst of this situation. So, just as we sort of settle into whatever the next 6 weeks will be, if there's really any space, and if so, I'd like to see how the program subcommittee can start doing that. So, if you could let us know if you think there's space for that in the midst of what we're all in here.
Well, there's a lot of work to go around, and we have been extremely busy. But
Right.
In my opinion, and just speaking personally, I will devote whatever extra time we need to do to keep moving on this, because it's to me it's one of our most urgent issues. If students aren't in the classroom, then all the other good stuff that teachers are doing, all the curricular advancements we're making in the world are not going to help if they're not in the classroom. So we have to solve this problem. And absolutely, I think subcommittee can and should have a role, because as I mentioned, I firmly believe this is a community issue, and I feel that it's a school committee issue, and the help of the school committee is going to be essential in strategy, messaging, engaging community partners, and it just that's a role that the school committee, I think, should, in my opinion, should be involved with, which is getting the message and representing the kind of feedback that we need from the community, but also thinking through the kinds of things we need to best get that information from parents, and then to put together the action plan. So I'd like to continue working.
Okay.
I'd like to continue working anytime after tomorrow.
Okay, great. I'll look forward to the community partners email you're sending to Sam. I'd love to see that as well.
Sure.
We'll get moving on that.
Go ahead.
I guess I just want to add also, have you considered some kind of a survey or 5 questions to the students, not just, maybe it's to parents and to kids, but, why do they feel school is less important on certain days? It could be anything. One, we're re-examining our policies on failure and we think they're giving up. It could be a student feels that he's a good student, and even if he isn't there, his grades are going to be just fine. So I would love to know maybe some, what are the 5 reasons, and how do we address those reasons, as opposed to just absences as the blanket term, because I think the motivations are different as to why some kids don't come or families don't encourage their kids to come, and addressing those particular reasons will be more successful than thinking everybody has the same reason.
Yeah, and possibly, probably I didn't articulate well enough at the very beginning, but I think I mentioned that after our very first meeting with this group, we identified that first thing we needed was more information from the students and from their families, and that's exactly what we're planning on doing, is developing a survey to get that kind of information directly from the students. And that's what I meant when I talked about attitudes and perceptions. So that's something that we had just started putting that together as first step.
Great, thank you.
I would ask that as the school committee begins to develop its goals for next year, that one of those goals has to do with the extent to which they take an active role in communicating the importance of attendance and what it means for children, families, the community at large, And so that shoulder to shoulder administration and school committee are sending out those messages early and often. Moving on, we've got the Gloucester High School stuff. I think people have had a chance to scan that. And O'Malley is administering a school climate survey. They are also pending funding, looking for an in-school suspension position with wraparound services. And there's a host of others here as well. We don't ignore the fact that curriculum and instruction that is engaging, motivating, gives children a sense of belonging. A lot of the stuff that we said early on, that also plays an important role in ensuring that attendance is good as well. We recognize that, and we'll be working on that end as well. So there are extrinsic reasons, whether education is not reinforced at home, or over the years a particular student has increasingly grown a sense that they have fallen behind to a point where it's painful for them to come to school because they don't feel that they can succeed. In addition to that, there is still the need for us to find at all levels an instructional delivery that is truly engaging for students to maximize the likelihood that they will continue to come to school. At the elementary, there's been talk about not only working and tightening up all the conferencing and the letters and so on and so forth, but really going at the at the kindergarten families, get them while they're vulnerable, but emphasize that the expectation and starting with those families early on with a real push for how important it is, the relationship between attendance, learning, and achievement. So that's something that that the elementaries are focusing in, along with the other bullets that you see on the screen. Next, we move to what's referred to as a tiered system of supports. You've heard the term response to intervention. There are students who are learning at different speeds, need extra help. We have made reasonable progress at the elementary level. And what this is basically saying here is that we need to come up with a similar type of conceptual framework at both the middle school and the high school. Greg, a little bit more, please.
Yeah, very briefly, and this is, you've heard me mention this before, that we've been working on a multi-district ECLC program where we have 6 districts working together on MTSS. And just to make it as clear as possible, what we mean by that is over the last 5 or 6 years at the elementary level, we really have developed a good system of tier 1 classroom basic instruction for all, tier 2 instruction where students may get more frequent or greater intensity instruction. And we have the principals and the teachers have really worked to establish a very well-defined system. And that's something that has, I've reported out earlier this year, has shown really great response in our MCAS scores, which have been terrific at the elementaries level. And that's the kind of systematic work that has begun, and we need to continue at our middle and high.
Next, this is an ongoing annual. It has to do with how we prepare our students for the next generation MCAS. I think I sent a notice out to the school committee recently that the new legislation, in all likelihood, I don't know if it's passed yet or not, but does give the commission the authority to postpone and cancel MCAS assessments for this year. The high school already is a week behind. They were supposed to be administering the test this week, in fact. I think there's a very strong likelihood, especially with the May 4th school closure piece, that we won't be seeing MCAS this year. Nonetheless, this is a sort of a compilation of many of the things that we do, analyzing the MCAS through a vehicle that we've used historically called a closer look, using MCAS analysis in data meetings so that local assessments and the MCAS merged so we can see what the correlation is between um, local achievement on the part of our students and how they're doing on the state standard, collaborative scoring, the use of the MCAS tests, review planning with coaches, collaborative scoring again. Don't ask me why. The particulars that are written into both the high school's turnaround and the middle school's evolving, developing sustainable improvement plans. The use of reference sheets seems pretty simple, but the sooner, it's like any tool, the sooner students are given an opportunity to work with something that they're going to be using on their MCAS, the more they become familiar with it, and hopefully the better they can perform. The same is true for graphic organizers. RACE is an acronym for how children are asked to approach something that they read, and they need to identify what it's about and what evidence there is for them to support an argument. And then I think I mentioned it before, but there's a local early warning intervention system that is being developed where all academic, statewide assessment, disciplinary, behavioral, and attendance information is all going to be compacted into one program so that like a photograph, we can see right in front of us, instead of going to 4 or 5 different data sources, this local early warning intervention system will provide us with a comprehensive real-time look at how children are performing. And in light of what we had said in the previous slides about multi-tiered system of support, the high school in particular, taking into account the transition from 8th to 9th grade and the difficulty, is looking to increase, to the extent that it can, its grade 9 academic support. Strengthening higher order thinking skills. Again, we've spoken about this also I spoke about it in terms of the absenteeism as well, but we want to continue to promote the development of high complex thinking to meet college and career readiness. What you see here on the screen are elements of the Gloucester High School turnaround plan. It takes into account the use of the PLC time, expanding peer observation, teacher to teacher, using observations by administrators where they notify teachers that they're coming in to see how they are prioritizing higher order thinking skills, and also the possible elimination of one of the lower ability group levels of classes. This is an ongoing discussion that's taken place for years and years and years. We tend to put children into different ability grouping levels because of past performance and the extent to which we feel that they can take on information at a particular rate. And yet, we also find sometimes that if you put kids into a class that is more accelerated and more challenging, many of them rise to the occasion. So that's sort of been a tension, not just here in Gloucester, anywhere, about the pros and cons of ability grouping levels. The high school, as it mentions here, is looking at a possible elimination of one of those tracks and moving them into a slightly more challenging program with support. At the O'Malley, again, in a way, this district improvement plan is not complete because we're not able to place all of the completed sustainable improvement plan elements from the middle school here, but be assured that once that is completed, those particular elements will make their way into this plan as well. And here we have some of the illustrations of what's taking place at the elementary level, things that have been going on. As I mentioned before, this district improvement plan isn't about coming up with brand new things on a yearly basis, but about making sure that what we're doing is refined from year to year. And so we're looking to do that in all subject areas. My emphasis here is on the ELA, the math and the science. With the math in particular, this use of multiple strategies to figure out a problem in addition to just giving kids the formula has been part and parcel of the Math in Focus program that we've been using now for 5 or 6 years. And the new FOSS science program also is designed to provide meaningful experiences and in the terminology of understanding by design for children to understand enduring understandings, what the conceptual piece is underlying the work that they're doing. Technology, what you see here for the most part has to do with the technological aspects, the infrastructure, the system itself. Grant, are you still with us?
I am.
Would you care to just talk through a couple of these?
Well, sure. I guess we can talk about the infrastructure. One of the biggest things with the schools is supporting our online assessments. And one of the things that we're working on is doing a complete wireless upgrade over the next year or so to basically be ready for the next generation of online assessments, as well as supporting the device densities per room. We have a very good set of coverage now, but there's always room for improvement. And we also want to start expanding wireless coverage in some of the other areas that we don't really have great coverage in, especially like the public spaces like auditoriums, gymnasiums, and those type of areas. So we need to do that, as well as add additional cabling for more phones, more devices in different locations. So we're going to be constantly looking at upgrading those devices, plus adding additional cabling as well to support those initiatives. I guess, do you want me to go down the list, or do you want me to?
Maybe one or two more.
Okay. I guess we can talk about implementing, talk about the new district websites. I have been working with some of the principals at the elementary level and the preschool, talking about some website redesigns, looking at different options that are available. I've met with school committee member and had a discussion about what sort of our goals and focuses are. So we're currently working on getting a new redesign and a revamping over the next several months. Good news is we have plenty of time to work on these things right now. So we are definitely taking it serious, and we're also looking at, during this time, how do we craft the message? How do we get the information out that's clean and concise without having to get lost in all the other day-to-day stuff? So it's definitely something that's on our focus, and we understand that this is the public-facing side of the district, and we need to do a little better work at getting it cleaned up and more to the point. Let's see. I know one of the things that's mentioned here is working on the transition to an online paperless enrollment. That's something that I'll be working with the administration, specifically with Greg and Dr. Sapphire, with getting all the necessary tools and sort of the information together. How do we go to online registration and document handling as much as possible, as well as making sure that those tools also provide multiple language opportunities for the community as well.
Great. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Meeting the individual needs of English language learners, continue to adjust to the needs of the ELL students, review of systems, practices, dedicating learning spaces, and adequate trained ESL staff. Part of our funding for the FY21 budget is to ensure that we have adequate numbers of staff in order to comply with the necessary time on learning for our ELL students. We will continue to sponsor classes for staff in sheltered English immersion strategies. Like the higher order thinking skills, we would like, through our observations, to monitor the use of those teaching strategies to ensure that those practices are taking place in the classroom. And pending Title III grant funding, we want to establish an after-school and summer tutoring program for ELL students so that the slide over the course of the summer is minimal. Use of data, I spoke about this before, this local early warning intervention system. It's a comprehensive review of data for individual students as well as subgroups. It will help us through future coordinated program reviews, but more importantly, it will provide us with real-time, in-the-moment data of across the spectrum, attendance, course failure, discipline, MCAS performance, and various other information sources as well. So we're looking forward, and perhaps when we're ready before the school committee, we'll have a presentation of how the system will work. This is an extension of the aforementioned coordinated program review. It's not enough to just pass the CPR and then not continue to do these things. So we are continuing to look at equal access to all programming. I can guarantee that not all of our subgroups are availing themselves of all of the classes that are available, but we are keeping track of it and speaking with administration at the high school in particular and guidance, and seeing what we can do to steer on a case-by-case basis children into more challenging programmatic material. We're looking annually, actually twice a year, we're looking at for patterns in disciplinary action to make sure that there are no inequities offending any of our particular student groups and subgroups. We have had trainings and review of curriculum review for bias and stereotyping. This is not something which is going to take place in one season, but over time we continue to look at what we have and certainly to investigate very closely any materials that are adopted from this point forward. And then last, for the third time, this LEWIS, this local early warning intervention system. Another ongoing goal is to maintain continuous improvement in both local assessments and performance on next generation MCAS. These are the target goals that have been established by the state. I have not put any comparisons here or anything along those lines. We've done MCAS analysis on two or three presentations this year. If at any point you'd like to see this chart with a comparison of where our groups were in 2019, I will certainly provide that for you. But these are the numbers that we will be seeking both 3 through 8 and at the high school, since those are the two major categories, along with all students and the lowest 20% of students, or 25%. But these are the targets that we're going for in all subgroups, at all schools, in the subject areas of ELA and math. We next turn to our penultimate goal, which has to do with professional culture and community and cultural responsiveness. Greg?
Sure. We began, I think I've shared this at a previous meeting, so I'll be brief. Out of our ECLC collaboration with multi-districts, we put together a group of administrators and teachers who attended summer trainings, actually 3-day summer institutes for the last 2 summers. And we also had a teacher council where teachers from each of 6 districts got together to come up with, to research and come up with implementation plans. Out of that teacher group, a recommendation was made to begin by reading a book called Cultural Proficiency in the Brain by Zaretta Hammond. That is a book that we conducted a book study last summer. It turned into professional development in November, and also became the basis for study group for all second-year mentees that I'm leading. It's been read and discussed by the entire leadership as well. So this is something that we are using as a basis for building into, for growing through the district through book studies, and then we're developing a 15-hour course. We were going to try to complete that this spring. Hopefully it may be pushed into the summer for rollout late summer and fall. And let's see, we will continue to work with ECLC. And we also had a group from the high school attend a race identity and systems exploration training. And I have not had a chance to hear feedback from that group yet. I believe James Cook was part of that. If he's on the line and would like to share a little bit about that, that would be great. If not, we can talk about that at a future meeting.
There was also an elementary group, by the way, as well, as I know because I sat with them.
Right. We did have principals and teachers who attended a shorter training. The high school then sent a team, I think, for in-depth training.
I believe James has his hand up.
Yeah. James, I think you can talk now. James, you hear me?
I can keep going. If James can chime in, that would be great. I'll stop and we can go back to this. How's that sound?
I think James he's not a panelist anymore.
No,
He just left the panelist list. James Cook, is that who you're talking about?
yes.
Yeah, he left panelist list. Oh, the attendee list, I'm sorry.
He's been promoted. Hi, sorry to interrupt. He's
Oh,
been
okay.
promoted to a panelist. Mr. Cook, you should be unmuted
Hear me?
Oh,
very faintly.
does he have
How
to
about
turn up his volume?
any better?
Higher.
How about that?
I can hear.
Okay.
Voice in the wilderness.
How can you hear me now?
Very quietly, James.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry you can't hear any better. I see my settings seem to be up high enough.
We can hear you.
Oh, okay. All right. So I'll just continue. Yeah. So we were asking about the race, identity, and systems exploration at the high school. We've had a team that actually started with exploration of race and identity from October at the beginning of this year. And then a team of teachers has been engaged with the other Essex County districts in the PD that Greg was talking about. As our district changes and becomes more diverse, teachers and administrators at the high school are particularly excited about the opportunities to have a systematic approach to supporting our students, our more diverse students, having a better understanding of the issues that some of our students face, and being proactive about designing instruction and designing a whole school environment that best supports all our students. It's been really exciting work. Unfortunately, some of it's been delayed, but we'll be excited to get back to it.
Okay,
Excuse me, can I ask a quick question?
sure.
Thank you. And you might get to this, or I think it's relevant, but is part of this discussion identifying a more comprehensive way to communicate more efficiently and readily with parents and families who don't speak English? So, for example, when I worked at the hospital, we had iPads and we could pick the language and we could pick video or just phone call, and I was able to sort of communicate with a patient in real time without having the need for a translator in the room or the need to schedule a translator. So I'm just sort of curious, is there money or any sort of encouragement for districts to come up with a plan to better communicate in real time with families if necessary?
Well, let me start off and saying that if we look at the first bullet, it is not designed for the question that you're asking. What it is designed for is for teachers to become increasingly aware of and sensitive to the fact that, and we've talked about this before, I believe, that different children perceive things in different ways, and much of it is ingrained based upon their particular culture. And in the past, I may have used the illustration that in some cultures, a teacher will say, look at me, and kids know that they better look up because otherwise the teacher's going to be upset with them. And there are certain cultures, if you ask a child to look an adult in the eye, that this is something that would be very embarrassing because they've been taught not to. So that's a very crass kind of illustration of what the cultural proficiency in the brain piece is supposed to use. What it is about is creating teachers that ultimately become warm demanders. That's the fancy buzzword that's used in the book. And it's a way of them learning to ally who they are with their understanding of how children from different groups learn, and in so doing have the leverage to place demands on children so they go from becoming a dependent learner to an independent learner. I don't know whether or not that particular book speaks to how we outreach to families. The brief exposure that I had to the race identity and systems exploration, and James is much more adept there. I was only able to stay for half a day due to something I had to go back into the district for, but it really at first was about the history of race in our country and how it shapes the way different types of people think and act, and the relationships between different races.
Yeah, so I guess I wasn't specifically asking in relation to these particular bullets, but just this, the bolded part says provide professional development to staff on being culturally responsive, right? So I feel like we can't really be culturally responsive if we can't communicate in somebody's native.
And the person who's not here, who I think could really help to answer that question, and we'll be glad to bring her to the next meeting, would be Christine Castle, who's our Title I coordinator, our ELL coordinator. She's involved in developing the English Language Parents Advisory Council. And I think that she could provide us with a little bit more specific direction in terms of answering your question.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Anybody else want to add something on this? Professional cultural communications and public relations. Here is a listing of some of the things that we have been doing, will continue to do. A portion of the question that Samantha is asking has to do with us sustaining a really vibrant English Language Parents Advisory Council, at least for starters. We have a number of councils, CPAC for special ed, the CVTE Advisory Board as well. One piece that I want to mention is on the bottom, on the right, to incorporate the recommendations of the newly established Ad Hoc Communications Subcommittee. That has, those recommendations are not, have not yet come to fruition, but that is something which certainly can be incorporated into this district improvement plan once we have some tangible directions in addition to what you see here. And last is, of course, the reminder on maintaining safety, that we will continue to review and maintain the major elements of our emergency management, our collaborative relationships with the police, fire, and health departments, our continued discussion, distribution of emergency management plans, the ongoing review of those plans by crisis management teams, our at least 2 a year simulations of potential tragic circumstance in our schools, maintaining our daily safety procedures and protocols, our established procedures regarding mental health and threat assessment, and protocols and procedures for new safety entrances at the high school and middle school, which I hope by a year from this coming summer will be in place. So that gives you our executive summary. Thank you for your patience in sitting through it. But those are the major and fundamental areas that we hope to be able to focus on and concentrate on going into next school year.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're back. This needs to be approved by the school committee. Do people feel comfortable voting on this evening, or would you like to put it off till the next meeting so you have more time to digest it? Laura?
Just a question. I mean, what's the action by our approving it or not approving it? What changes?
Well, what changes is that it gets published as approved by the school committee and distributed to the schools, and it's used as the guideline for developing the school improvement plans.
So by not approving it, we delay the rollout of that process. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm comfortable voting tonight.
Me
Okay.
too.
All right. Well, will we make a motion?
I move that we approve the district improvement plan as presented.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. Seeing none, our roll call vote?
Kathy Clancy,
Yes?
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Mr. Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Weason,
Yes.
and Ms. Watson.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. I am going to take another thing out of order, seeing that Dr. Sapphire is up, and his other issue here is the 3-year student opportunity plan, which is going to look a lot like the district improvement plan. So why don't we just proceed with that?
Right. Is this on your screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you recall, the Student Opportunity Act was passed a few months back, and more monies have been appropriated towards schools. We anticipate that $229,000 in addition to our Chapter 70 funding. This has been mentioned to you before. What the state is asking for is a clear, concise, succinct initial student opportunity plan, a 3-year student opportunity plan. We have used the template, what's referred to as the short form, which is predicated on the amount of money that is being allocated in addition to the Chapter 70 funding. Anything under 1.5 million, I believe, calls for the use of the short-term plan. You'll see that some of the action steps that we've included are melded with the district improvement plan, so I won't go over them at length. And they also are consistent. I had sent out the guidelines, if not the last meeting, but the meeting before. I think the last meeting, I had set out the guidelines from the state, and on page 6 or page 8, there were 16 research-based directions that schools could choose and use as the basis for their action steps for the student opportunity plan, and we have done that. So beginning with commitment number 1, which student groups will require focused support to ensure all students achieve at high levels in school and are successfully prepared for life. In particular, we are looking at our lowest performing group, our economically disadvantaged, our students with disabilities, and also our Hispanic population as well. And as far as these subgroups are concerned, we're particularly looking at one of our elementary schools, the middle school, and the high school. The third paragraph in this section talks a little bit about the disparities in graduation rates between white students and Latinx students. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done, bringing up that particular group, our special needs and our low income, in terms of the graduation rates. I mean, it all seems to meld together. And the last paragraph is that other contributing factor, which has to do with chronic absenteeism, which is dramatically higher amongst our lowest performing groups. Again, we spoke earlier about the less successful you are, the more likely it is that you might find ways of not attending school. I believe we have 4, as we move into commitment number 2, there are 4 evidence-based programs. The first is what we intend to do through the budget. And each of these listings, excuse me, should be familiar to the school committee. These are all that are found in option A and B. And what I do need to add to this, and we'll do so, are the 3 positions that have been added to our budget proposal for option C as well. Each of these are designed to provide social emotional support, increase coordination of efforts amongst our lowest performing economically disadvantaged students, our students with disabilities, and our Hispanic Latino populations as well, oftentimes being our ELL students. Our second, as you heard at length with the district improvement plan, has to do with supporting educators to implement high quality aligned curriculum. What you see here for the most part has been taken almost verbatim from the turnaround plan at the high school. And again, the caveat in the third paragraph that the middle school is currently developing its sustainable improvement plan. And we will be adding those particulars both to the DIP and to this plan as well once they are complete. Again, I want to remind you that the state is expecting a very concise report at this time, which is what we've provided. The third are research-based early literacy programs. And there is a listing here of many of the programs. We spoke about some of the higher order thinking strategies for the elementaries when we did the district improvement plan. These bullets in essence are a listing of many of those particular programs. The fourth one, no stranger to our conversation tonight, has to do with reducing the rates of chronic absenteeism. And you saw us several slides alluding to these particular action steps as well. The commitment number 3 has to do with monitoring success with outcome metrics and targets. Fancy way of saying how you're going to measure all this. And we'll be looking at student growth percentiles, 4-year cohort graduation rates, which we reported on at the last meeting, the mean student growth percentiles in math, chronic absentee rates. For some of our local stuff, there's the monthly attendance and discipline reports from our local early warning intervention system, grades, course completions and failures by subgroups, and DIBELS at the elementary level. They've come out with a new version of DIBELS, DIBELS 8, so we'll be incorporating that into the district next year as well. Commitment number 4 has to do with engaging all students, and you see here a listing of some of the examples of how we try to bring our families into conversation about schooling. We spoke at length about the collaborative partnership with Gloucester and Cape Ann agencies to develop a community-based website, providing families new to Gloucester a platform to learn about schools, programs, agencies, and resources that are available. And we've also centralized our registration. I think we had a very successful launching of a centralized registration program at 2 Blackburn this summer, and we will continue on that pace. This way, there's no confusion. Families know, based on the information online, based upon phone calls, they know exactly where to go. They don't have to worry about going to a particular school and whether or not there's staffing there or not over the summer. They now know that there are hours at central office where they can register. Last, we have to check off that we engage stakeholders in the district in accordance with the Student Opportunity Act. And we met with a handful of people on March the 12th, and we went over this bit by bit. We received feedback from them. We sent them a copy of this after the meeting so they could reflect on it for a while. They sent us whatever comments and corrections they felt were a part of it. And so we feel that we have engaged with our stakeholders. And although I've checked this prematurely, it certifies that the district school committee voted on the Student Opportunity Plan. Technically, and originally, this was supposed to be voted on and approved by April the 1st. The same legislation I mentioned before about MCAS also gives the commissioner the authority, although he's not done it yet to my knowledge, but has the authority to delay the submission of the student opportunity plans. But quite frankly, I think we're pretty confident that this is in reasonably good shape. It resonates with the district improvement plan, and we feel that it's good to go. So our respectful recommendation is to ask the school committee to approve this tonight.
Okay.
It looks like there's a couple of things you'll need to tighten up. Like there says the meeting date was held on, the meeting was held on, and then it has a capital date. And then it says the draft plan, by checking here, the next, at the bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then the next paragraph says that it was presented to the school committee's program subcommittee prior to the vote on March 12th, but I don't think you did, right? That meeting didn't happen?
That may have been canceled. That's correct.
Okay, so okay.
Okay.
While we're at it, March is misspelled after that highlight.
Where's this?
At the end of that,
Match.
the full committee voted on the plan
Match?
on March.
That's how they say it in Massachusetts. Come on.
Yeah.
Okay. Melissa?
I might have missed this at the beginning, but can you just tell me who collaborated to come up with this plan?
We sent out invites to a host of stakeholders, all members of site-based council. We've got about 4 or 5 people that showed up. And to answer your question, this particular document was developed here at Central Administration. It was then reviewed with a group of stakeholders.
I got you.
Melissa, we've lost you here. Did you?
I don't know what's going on.
I've lost.
Oh, wait.
We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right, so I'm sorry. I heard you sent to a bunch of stakeholders. So who were they real quick?
They were members of site-based council.
Okay.
We had sent out invitations to all the site-based councils, and only about a handful showed up, but that we went ahead and we worked on the document with them. As I said before, we then sent it to them to review it over time. They sent it back to us, and that's what you have here.
Was staff involved? I missed that. I apologize. I had a bad internet connection.
Yeah. The staff that were involved, it was mostly done in central office.
Okay.
And it was mostly based upon the district improvement plan in concert with the 16 research-based recommendations that the state had put forward in those guidelines, which I shared with you a couple of weeks ago.
Okay, thank you very much.
So as you said, this originally was due to be submitted before April 1st. There's a reasonable expectation that it could be delayed, but whereas we have it, we may as well move it forward. Correct?
Yeah, I speak for others, I think, in saying that we feel that it's in pretty good shape.
Okay.
Can I make a motion to approve the student opportunity plan for 2021 to 2023?
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? I can't see everybody, so speak up if you'd like to. There we go. All right. If there's no further discussion, roll call vote.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Okay, it passes unanimously. We're on the home stretch here, folks. The school committee annual calendar, that was distributed at our last meeting. Let me just get it up here. You all have, it's in your packet. I don't need to put it on the screen. The essential changes, the biggest change is moving the superintendent's evaluation to the end of the school year. There are some minor changes moving around when the handbooks are approved, that being at the end of the school year rather than the beginning of the school year. I added in, we had this discussion that at BNF, but all of the booster clubs are supposed to report their expenses and income, and it's supposed to be reviewed by the school committee. So I've added that for each season at the appropriate time. A lot of the other things stay the same. Is there any, this is just a guideline. Things can be added, obviously things are added to it constantly, but this is just sort of an outline that we should be using every year to make sure that we have some consistency. Is there anything that people would like to add? Laura, or comment?
I'm just wondering if we, given the conversation about absenteeism, if we want to add sort of review of, and Greg is advocating for a major sort of school committee push on this. If we want to put in sort of a, like just revisiting that particular, because what I recall from what Greg wants is like a really community-wide push. So I don't know if we want to put a little signal in there to us, to sort of revisit and discuss where we are at the beginning of the school year with that.
Okay, well, we usually get a report on absenteeism, attendance.
But I don't mean as a report. I mean, we're talking about sort of a major community push.
No, I understand this. I'm just saying, this is an annual calendar that's supposed to be for every year. That's in front of being in program right now.
Right.
And my assumption is that that push will come out of whatever comes out of program, and that's this is
okay.
More specific. We could add something, Kathy.
Yeah, I know we have MCAS review in there, and I want to suggest that, we probably like a month or, 2 meetings or 3 meetings from there, that we also include a more detailed presentation like what happened this year, which gets into more the grade level and some of the pieces after the district has had a chance to look at it, understand what it means, understand where their strengths and weaknesses. So I would like to add that at some meeting after that.
So we have MCAS, the report at the end of September. Perhaps, are you suggesting that that it be more about strategies or what we really learned from MCAS?
No, I suggest that we have a, school and grade level presentation of MCAS results, because the one that comes in September tends to be more in aggregate.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So.
And so I leave it to,
combine with that with the fall benchmark assessments.
Yeah.
More or less.
Yeah, when they're ready and have had a chance to figure out what they want to present.
Okay.
I also recall we used to do a state of the schools, but I don't see it on this calendar. Is that basically what we do with our budget now?
We haven't done that for a while. I remember we did that as sort of as a big presentation. We did it at O'Malley and
yes, I remember.
And is that something there's any interest in reviving? Anybody remember it? Melissa?
I remember it.
Yeah.
Wait, sorry, I lost my internet there for a minute. What did you ask?
Kathy was suggesting, reminding us that we used to do a state of the schools presentation.
Okay.
I think the last time we did it was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it's been a while.
At O'Malley. Well, the question is whether we want to revive
I think it was
that.
actually when Val was on the committee, wasn't it? Or did we do one after?
I don't recall having
It used
done
to be alternated with the educational forums through the Gloucester Education Foundation, 1 year on, 1 year off.
Samantha?
Can you just explain what it was? Did people school mailing, or was it like what? What does it entail?
It was a presentation to the public. And I believe the Education Foundation had some part in it. And it was just basically a presentation of sort of a compilation of MCAS results, new programs, what's going on in the schools. It's almost like an annual report, I guess, that you would make to the public about where we're at and what was going on. You know, I don't know, what you want to add to that, Kathy? Or?
No, that's exactly what it was. It was a way to communicate kind of, you know, where our schools were at. My recall was that the attendance was not great.
Still isn't.
And so, you know, so I could suggest that maybe, you know, at a certain point every year, the superintendent does some type of a communication to the district and to families about those elements that we would have put in a presentation, you know, some scaled down version.
Well, the city still does an annual report, I believe.
Yeah.
And the schools are supposed to provide information for that annual report.
Okay, so then
Should be
maybe
in conjunction with that, I would think. Melissa?
I want to ask a question, but if it's not on this topic, so if someone has a question on this topic, then.
Sam?
So as part of the new communications ad hoc subcommittee, I think this would be a really good topic to sort of delve into a little deeper, because I do think that community outreach on the part of the school committee, but also the new superintendent, because we're going to have a new superintendent, is really important. So I do think maybe we just need to delve a little bit deeper in a subcommittee on this topic.
Just because it's not on the annual calendar doesn't mean we can't do it.
Right, of course.
I mean, this is, Laura?
No, I was just going to say it sounds great and important, and I second what Sam says, that we should figure out the most efficacious way to do it, you know, and to how to, you know, make the most of the communications opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else? Melissa?
I don't know if this needs to go on a calendar, but every year we're supposed to vote whether we do school choice or not.
That's right.
I think it's usually around March, if I
Yeah.
remember correctly. I don't know if you want to put that on the calendar just to remind us, or because it is March now.
Yeah, well, I think we just do that? Didn't we just vote that on the?
School choice? I don't think so, but I
No.
think
School choice students.
I think you have to notify the department by June. I'll look that up, but we've done that year in and year out. But
Yeah.
You're absolutely right that it needs to be done.
Right.
Otherwise, they assume if you don't submit the school committee's vote, then the Department of Ed assumes that you are having choice. So.
Okay.
Okay, like I say, this can be amended at any time, and it's really just a guideline, just so we don't let things fall through the cracks. Another thing that we're supposed to do every year, which I don't believe is on here, is that we're supposed to review our executive session minutes and decide which ones can be released to the public, which we could add that. But that sort of is as needed, I believe.
That's supposed to be done quarterly.
Yeah.
So we would have to
Well,
look at.
we can add it quarterly.
Yeah.
It has to be done in executive session.
Mhm.
Right. Okay. Anything else? So do we have a motion to accept the annual school committee calendar as amended?
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. No, I can't do that. Roll call vote. I knew I blew that before the day was over. Roll call?
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Poe,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Okay. The next order of business, it passes unanimously. The next order of business is the issue of pay increases for the contracted employees. Now, what this is, and it's in their contracts by and large, but we're talking about the principals, the vice principals, the IT people, who else is contracted services?
Director of Food Service, Director of Special Education, CFO.
So it is in their contract that they would be given the same percentage increase as was granted to the GTA. But we just have to approve it. But if we don't approve it, I think we're in violation of our contracts. So it's in the budget. So do we have motion?
I move that we approve the raises for the contracted employees.
Second.
Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. Roll call vote.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Poe,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
Okay. All right, we're getting there. Subcommittee reports, and we have a couple of action items coming out of BNF. So Kathy, would you like to make your report?
Well, my report, we did our meeting last week on March 18th via a conference call, and everybody except the mayor was present on that particular call. So my report is going to be short since everybody listened to that, and we'll have verbatim minutes on that as to the transcript. A couple highlighted items. One, we discussed that we need to have Mike Hale, the DPW director, invited to a meeting, whether it be subcommittee or full committee, as our annual discussion of what he has in the budget and also what he is seeing within the schools and the conditions of the schools. Along that vein, it was reported that there's work that's going to be going on at the O'Malley Courtyard, which is pretty exciting that there's going to get some updates there and some trees. I think we're still waiting to see what the specific plans are, but we're excited that that's going to happen. The other piece of news that should be reported, there's two things. One, the carbon monoxide detectors, apparently we've had in all schools except Gloucester High School and East Gloucester, so those will be installed. And the other item of importance is Plum Cove modulars. Apparently there's a sprinkler room in between the building and the modulars that is in great need of repair. I don't know if Gary wants to chime in on that, but I thought we should make sure we highlight that, because I recall at least 3 years ago, Mike Hale was with the school committee, and he said one of the things that keep him up at night are our modulars. So, so that's a repair that should be on our radar.
Yeah, I will just add that the floor is sinking on the modular at Plum Cove. And it's they're going to check it out, see if they can make repairs to that. That's all I have on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Any, so we have two action items coming out of that BNF meeting. Would you like to proceed with those?
Sure. Let's see. Agenda. Okay. Two items have to do with the request to transfer funds to the, from the school department to the city. So the first one is, I move that we approve to authorize the CFO to request additional approval to transfer $60,000 for the Gloucester High School resource officer from the school department budget to the police department budget. And I so move.
Second. Any discussion? This is, we do this every year. It's to pay for the student resource officer at the high school. And it was the original agreement that we had with the police department, is that we would pick up this part of the officer Scola's salary. Joel?
My question relates to, should we be expecting, as the resource officer at O'Malley, who's not there full-time, should we be expecting that this is going to get wrapped in also, or are we continuing only to pay for the high school resource officer?
The O'Malley resource officer is paid for by the city, and it was Mayor Taken has pushed that forward back after the school shootings in Florida, and they have never expressed, the city has never expressed to us that they wanted us to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you, City.
Right. Thank you. Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
No.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Absolutely.
Mayor Taken,
Absolutely. And once we get more money, I'm going to hire more resource officers. So Joel?
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
It carries 6-1.
I want the kiss in the minutes.
The second one is, Kathy, you want to take the,
Yeah, the second action item is approval to authorize the CFO to request a special budgetary transfer from the city council in the amount of $315,221 for out-of-district expenses to be paid through the school choice program. And I think that should state transferred to the city council, not from. And I so move.
second. Discussion. This is basically reimbursing the city for the special education expenses associated with students that are choiced out to other districts and are then requiring additional special needs services. And the state pays those services, but then they deduct it from the Chapter 70 allocation. So this is to reimburse the city for those special needs expenses. It's budgeted. It is, and it is an agreement that we've had with the city and for a number of years. So I would just point out that they do absorb all of the other out of district choice out student expenses. Any discussion? Any further discussion? Roll call vote.
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Weason.
Yes.
It passes unanimously. We'll move on to the Massachusetts School Building Authority project update. The was supposed to be a presentation to the city council last night. That was put off. I'm just trying to remember when the last meeting was, whether since we've had a school, well, the last school building committee meeting was after our last school committee meeting, and what was presented was some interior design suggestions about what some of the spaces, inside spaces, would look like, as well as some talk, some discussion about the options for HVAC systems. There was no votes. There was no decisions made. It was just basically presentations for feedback. The only other news is I spoke or I texted with Chip Payson today about the Article 97 disposition and where it is with the state legislature. And he said they had submitted it. The state had sent it back looking for more definitive information about the two different parcels of land, and as far as the exact acreage and square footage. And that has been provided. Greg Catamatori has done that work, and it has been resubmitted, and it is in the hands of our legislative team at the moment. And I don't know really what their schedule is like, given the current circumstances. So we'll just have to stay tuned to when that would appear before the legislature. Any questions? Okay. I apologize to Sam. She had wanted to bring something up at the beginning of the meeting, and I completely let it slide by. I'm sorry. Okay, well, we can do it next time. Is there anything else that we need to, Melissa?
You're muted.
We're not hearing you.
I sent an email earlier this week and was hoping that we could at least talk or keep it on our minds about, in case school doesn't go back in session. I mean, they extended us to May 4th now. We don't know what's going to happen. But a lot of parents are concerned about the prom and graduation. So I would just hope that any conversations include rescheduling as opposed to canceling. We can just think about that as we go forward, because it's senior year is such a big year. And like I said, a lot of parents don't want their students to miss out on
Right.
celebration.
Samantha?
It's not in relation to what Melissa just said, but I am feeling like it would be helpful to try to touch base more often than every 2 weeks, given the nature of all of the moving parts related to what's happening in our schools right now. I feel slightly out of the loop and a little sort of uncertain about what our role is. And obviously, as things continue to develop, we have a lot of questions, and I would send them via email, but I don't want to violate open meeting law by, engaging everybody in a conversation. So go ahead, Rich. Sorry, you're unmuted.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I'm in complete agreement. We've been using the superintendent report as the means for conveying information about what is transpiring during the school closure and the like. But I've also been sending out notices to you as well. And in many respects, tonight's superintendent's report was a compilation of what I've been sending out. So I will continue as frequently as is warranted to send out notices to the school committee about what I'm hearing and what's taking place, and whether or not and to what extent there is a role for the school committee as well. And without violating any law, if a question is submitted and I send out an answer, Jonathan, to the school committee at large, or at least an opinion or whatever, is there any issues with that?
No, we're not deliberating. That's, you can do that. If you have a question, just as long as it's sent out to everybody.
Right. So there you have it. Okay.
Laura?
No, so I'm just following up on what Sam said. So, so we can then send you a question, Rich, or a concern in the school closure time. And as long as we send it to the entire school committee, you can respond, and that's not a violation.
That's what I'm hearing. Yes.
That's,
But
as long
there's no
as
ability
we're
for us
not,
to discuss.
as long as we're not deliberating. I mean, if you, the question to Rich and the Rich responds to everyone, I don't see any problem with that.
And but as Rich said, what if he sees a role for the school committee, or he sees something that we can do that would be helpful, or that a committee could do that would be helpful?
Well,
I'm just trying to figure out the limits here.
seeing as this is so easy and you can do it from the comfort of your own home, I don't see, if people want to engage in a dialogue about what's going on, why we couldn't do this more often, as Sam said.
Yeah, I don't want to create more work for people, but I also feel like, again, this is so unprecedented. We have so many questions. There's so much uncertainty in the community. The more that we know, the more that we can sort of get the information out in a more efficient way.
Right, right.
Melissa?
So as chair, any one of us can write to the chair if we have any questions or want to have a certain conversation, and Jonathan can call a special meeting at any time. Plus, Jonathan keeps in touch with the superintendent often too. So when Jonathan feels like a lot of information is built up, he can decide whether we have another meeting too, or we can all call for a special meeting and just ask Jonathan to have one if we have a special concern.
Yeah.
But I think Jonathan's pretty much testing the waters with the superintendent to know when we should have more information.
Joel?
Just for predictability, wouldn't it be easier if we just said, through this duration, we're going to, every Wednesday have this meeting, and every other will look like this with the full agenda, and the interim will be, a one-item agenda update on COVID-19 related school closure. And that way we can have a conversation via Zoom with the superintendent and everyone else in attendance, and we know when it's happening in advance. And if it's a slow week, it's a slow week, but I don't think there'll be many slow weeks for the next few.
I don't see any problem with doing it that way.
I like that idea. I also like that the community can listen in. I think it's a really nice way to make sure that people are getting all the right information.
Yeah, we're going to, if I may, we're going to establish an hour or two a week, sort of like a remote superintendent's corner, where we'll be available for the public if they want to call in, and we'll pick up a couple of topics for that week. We could talk about the lunch program. We could talk about the evolution of what's happening in the classes, whatever it is. And I'll have a couple of people like Greg and Gary and Pat and Patty and some of the principals and stuff. So they're there, they can answer questions as well. So we'll start some hours. I will continue, as I sent the roundtable meeting information I got today, and I sent that to you. And I'm trying to send out that information as quickly as possible to you, any messages and the like. That, in addition to the Wednesday meetings, if there's something to report, all well and good. If not, then we can, go to the next week. But you're absolutely right. The need for ongoing dialogue now is absolutely, top priority. And the other top priority is that we get into negotiations, hear what to circle back, hear what the Department of Ed has to say, get into our conversations with the union and bang something out so that we can go to the next phase.
Okay, anything else?
I just want to go back to Sam's original introduction to the idea, but the fact of questions that we can ask. I mean, we've always historically been able to send questions through the chair, like Melissa said. If it's operational in nature, usually the superintendent would respond to everybody so that we all get the answer. I just want our questions to be not necessarily based on rumor, but based upon, what is going, how many kids showed up for lunch this past week on average, or, that it's more like real questions, not so-and-so told me in the grocery store, can you confirm or deny, right? I just want it to be not rumor-based questions, but inquiry-based questions.
Inquiry into the particular area in question, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're developing, for the lack of a better word, a whole new program, right? Like online learning is a whole new ballgame. And I think we just need to be able to engage in conversations around some of these equity issues on a more regular basis. That's really my concern is I feel like I just have a lot of questions and I don't want to be bombarding everybody with emails. I think it's just way more efficient to have a conversation.
Yeah.
But the extent to which if we're going to be meeting on a Wednesday, the extent to which we have those conversations in advance, there's a greater likelihood we'll have some form of response for you as well.
So send your questions in advance.
Keep your letters coming in,
We
right?
can do that. We'll set that up. Anything else? Joel?
So we canceled the last programs meeting. It didn't seem to make sense given everything that had transpired. And so I'm looking for guidance from the committee as a whole, what the program subcommittee should be looking to do with its time going forward. Should we still just keep, an eye to the future when we return to normalcy and start working on the projects that we'll work on, gearing up for our eventual return back to physical school? Should we look to address certain issues related to our temporary reality? I'm just looking for guidance from the committee as to how best the program subcommittee can assist the committee or the district. Just throwing that out there.
Well, I think that, trying to work on, as Sam said, we're reinventing the delivery of education right now for us. And that is certainly something that program subcommittee should be aware of and have the opportunity to know about. As far as the future goes, I think we don't want to just drop the ball on attendance. I mean, it's kind of hard to take attendance right now, but we're going to be back there, and so I don't think there's the urgency to come out with something tomorrow, but I think you need to be working on it. So I think you should keep working on the future. That's my opinion. Laura?
Well, I just wanted to ask Dr. Sapphire if there is a way that the program subcommittee can be, useful or helpful to you as we reinvent the wheel. And then, so that's a question for Dr. Sapphire. And then secondly, Joel, that's why I asked Greg. I mean, he's ready to keep going with the absenteeism issue. And I think, I heard that loud and clear. And I feel like if we do use the time, both with the current crisis and then sort of thinking ahead for that, I think it would be time very well spent.
Kathy, you had something?
Yeah, and I agree. There's certain things that definitely address, like the turnaround plan and things that are very important initiatives. I think we need to be mindful of anything that goes on. Any subcommittee agenda has more of an immediacy to it, or doesn't put too much stress on those people who are trying to do all the reinventing. So everything program does involves the superintendent and or assistant superintendent. The attendance obviously involves the principal of the high school, probably more than some of the other principals. So, so as a priority, I guess they should be in line with both the district improvement plan and what those priorities are, as opposed to some other topic you may think is something you want to talk about. We should all think, does it have to be talked about in the next month? Or is that like 3 months from now when we're all back to a little more normalcy?
Okay.
Dr. Sapphire, were you going to say something?
I just, in partial response to your question, the fact that the school committee at large is going to be meeting on a weekly basis to go over some of the operational matters in response takes a little bit of the wind out of the sails of the program subcommittee.
Right.
But there may also be, and I think it was mentioned, things like the implementation of turnaround. Well, we're kind of, I don't know what we can or cannot present because of the way things are going right now. It would be helpful. I know that the first program subcommittee with the new chair came up with a listing of potential items. If you could submit that to us, so that Greg, myself, and the others can think in terms of what we can do to contribute toward that, and then establish that interaction where at a minimum the program subcommittee is helping to carve, shape, and make recommendations based upon things that are very timely right now.
So it sounds like given the meetings that are going to be happening more weekly, yeah, you're right. That doesn't make sense to sort of have it in both.
Right, we're not reporting to the program subcommittee, we're reporting to the school committee at large. And there's a point to be made there because right now everything is remote, and having any committee in between still keeps that separation and distance over time. So.
Okay.
Okay. I would like to just thank James Pope, who hosted this meeting and worked with almost all of us and got us familiar with Zoom. And I thought this meeting went, quite well, all things considered. Thank you, James. And thanks.
Thanks, James.
Great job.
You're welcome. To many more.
Okay.
Happy Wednesday.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Roll call vote?
Kathy Clancy,
Yes.
Mr. Favazza,
Yes.
Chairman Pope,
Yes.
Ms. Prince,
Yes.
Mayor Taken,
Yes, be safe, everyone. Good night.
Ms. Watson,
Yes.
and Ms. Wiesen.
Yes.
Okay. This meeting is adjourned.